Hey everyone, today I've got two really exciting examples to walk through. First, we're going to run through a new technique called Lightning. It's a very quick way to render your images, and it also retains a lot of high detail to it as well. And secondly, we're going to do basically a local LLM. If you think about it like a ChatGPT, but it's completely local to your system, as well as a very quick and easy install as well. As always, please feel free to share and like and subscribe. And otherwise, let's get into it. Okay, so first of all, before we get into Lightning, there's lots of different ways now that we can render our images. And I've gotten lots of questions from folks on which is the best method and what's the fastest, etc. And I find that many times you have to use different techniques for different sort of needs. And so I put together this workflow. It's going to be included, as always, in the description, a link to it. And I have several different examples to run through that you could basically copy and then tailor from. So for example, and I have it all bookmarked, so we're starting with step one here. The first one is Lightning. This is the new method we're going to run through. There's a couple of different key items to include here. First of all, the loader is set up as usual. One actually exception, something I've added to the loader now going forward, is that use everywhere node. There's a node called seed everywhere. So many times you don't want to have to play with how many different kinds of seeds do I want to use, etc., or when do I want to fix all my seeds, etc. And so what I've done is you add this one node here, seed everywhere, and then everywhere where you would have a widget that shows, specify the actual seed, you basically right-click your node and go to convert it into in this case, converting it into an input, but then it looks like it's a widget. So by doing so, you don't have to hook anything up, and basically any renderer, any sampler going forward automatically brings in that seed. So in the future, if you want to just change all the seeds to the next one or to a random number, etc., you can basically change one value and it reflects everywhere. So that's kind of cool. For Lightning, the key elements that you need to include, I'll include links in the description, are basically a LoRa model and the LoRa itself. And the cool thing is there's actually three different flavors of this. There's a 2-step, a 4-step, and an 8-step version. Of course, even the 8-step is really quick. And I've been experimenting between the two. I actually like 8 steps a lot, but I've also used 4. I find 2 is a little too rudimentary in terms of the level of detail, but you could use it also to paint your latent to set things up, which we'll actually be doing as an example soon. So in any case, if you basically in your sampler, if you connect up a LoRa model, you're going to put in your LoRa directory. I basically created an accelerators subfolder just to keep things clean. Basically a Lightning, and it's called a PTH. It's not a safe tensor file, but it will operate the same way when you put in that file and reference it in this node. And again, as always, right, these are foundational nodes, so you don't have to download anything special here. You just have to download the LoRa model as well as the LoRa itself. And so I basically have them both here. I have been playing around with the different settings, and I actually like a strength of 50%. I think at 100%, which is 1.0, I just find that the details are almost like too overdone, a little too overly rich. But you can play with it to your preference to get the latest out of it. Now, I basically hook up this load model first, and then I connect it into the LoRa itself, and then I connect that model into the sampler. So you can see here the beginning point is part of the use everywhere to bring in my regular model, right? So in this case, I have my Photo XL, which is a normal SDXL model. I want it to be a little bit more photographic in my example, but you can use any SDXL model. In fact, there are already several models that have come through that are Lightning specific. They tend to be a little bit faster. Details about the same pretty much, but you may want to check them out if the model meets your needs. Okay, so as you can see, right, other than that, you're basically running the same exact render as normal. The step number is again going to match up to whatever step level of Lightning you're going to use. So again, 2 steps, 4 steps, 8 steps. So if you have 4 steps on your LoRa models, then you are going to use the 4 steps in your sampler. Typically the default CFG value was 2. I found that, again, too rich, a little too overbaked. So I brought it down to 1.25, and I find that's a good value. But again, you can play with it as normal. The key element here that I find that gets the best results is SGM uniform. You can try some of the other ones, but you'll see that it either looks almost electrified or other sorts of missed details that you would not want to include in your end images. But for artistic purposes, you may want to play with it again. Otherwise, it's all the same. So you can see in 4 steps, you have such level of detail into the parrot, lots of side details, including the orange and the waterfall bokeh in the background. This is, again, only 4 steps, which is pretty amazing. So that's the first model. Second approach is our LCM. So here we have, as normal, right, we're bringing in our positive and negative VAUs everywhere. Everything else has been the same as we have done LCM. So we have the LCM LoRa, which is on the Civ site, and also I'm using 2 CFG, Keras in this case. The sampler is LCM specific, so it's LCM. But again, as always, we've seen lots of great detail with LCM for the end images. Between Lightning and LCM, I kind of give the advantage over to Lightning now, because you'll see if you do start doing comparisons, the subject of the images you're creating are typically about the same level of detail. A lot of high detail, a lot of detail in the wings. Maybe you see a touch more in Lightning, but where you'll see the difference is in the background and the sub elements. So you'll see a lot more detail based on your prompt in your backgrounds and your side stuff. Okay, so that's LCM. In this case, this example was 15 steps. Again, you can modify as needed. Number 3 is a blend between Lightning and just regular. So you could see I used the 8-step model in this case. And as before, I have my LoRa model and my LoRa. Now this time 8 steps for my Lightning. That again goes into my first sampler here. So you can see the 8 steps here. I found that using the DPM PP2S Ancestral sampler worked really well with the SGM uniform as well. But again, just play with it to find the best combo that works best for you. Additionally, so the VAA encoder is as normal. I did also include this high-res fix. Some people call it deep shrinking. Essentially, it does some sort of kind of compression or some sort of synthesis in the back end. Again, I'm not a computer scientist. For a normal resolution, 1024 by 1024, not a huge difference I've found. It does give a little more variety I found in the subject matter, but nothing substantial. But where it really shines is if you increase the resolution. So especially if you do it very wide or very tall. If you don't use this node, it will you'll have multiple kind of half merged people that are kind of dispersed amongst your image, right? So like in this case, you may have many different parrots, but they look identical, and some may be missing a head or something. So this actually fixes that. And I found good results with 3, 5, 900, 600. But again, as always, just feel free to play with it because the different levels of compression and how it does its kind of back-end calculations does have an effect on the actual image, right? So it will change your image pretty substantially. So you just have to play with it to get the right combo for you. In any case, so we take our 8-step Lightning, and then we're now piping it into a second sampler to do a little bit of refining. And the reason you do the refining, if I zoom way in here, you can kind of see just a little bit of background that has a little bit of kind of almost like a little bit of banding. It's not quite perfect. Sometimes you'll see also with the subject matter, there's little jagged edges or things that need to be cleaned up. So this really kind of makes the detail pop. I mean, it's very, very impressive, both foreground and background. And you don't have to do a lot of steps, right? In this case, I'm only doing 10 steps. You're just kind of like almost like buffing out if you're sharpening a knife, right? You're buffing out kind of some of the edges. But it's otherwise it's a pretty normal deal. And then you can again play with the denoise level, play with the step level. But I found the results out of this for a total, right? This is 8 steps and 10 steps, only 18 steps for an image, you're getting some real substantial detail out of these prompts. So pretty impressive stuff. The next one is just our standard kind of render. That's 18 steps. I'm not going to go into detail because we do that all the time. I also included a turbo setup as well. Some people have been liking to play with the turbo models. And we haven't really had a video on this yet, but there's some benefits and some drawbacks to turbo. One of the drawbacks is you're limited to a total of 10 steps, right? Because it's meant to be really, really quick, and you actually have it down to typically 3 or 4 steps, which looks really bad, but gives you a sense of composition. And then when you get more and more into wanting to refine it into its final form, you increase the number of steps. But you could see the total is 10. So you're not going to get any higher than that with the turbo without going into a separate upscaler or a separate refiner stage. It's not so bad. It has a lot of detail, but I have to say it's not even close in terms of the total detail with Lightning or even that Lightning blend that I was showing you. In either case, I think it's a really good call it set of examples. I actually brought them all together into a final sort of blend, so you can kind of see them all next to each other side by side. And I think this will be a useful resource for you. Okay, on to our second example. So we're going to use LLM, right? Kind of that local ChatGPT to be able to, in this case, describe and re-render an image. So in this case, I have it just normal setup here. I'm doing my Lightning, just as we did it before. So I basically just have a very, very basic prompt, right? Man's feeding a carrot to a horse. It renders it as appropriate. I do the little final polishing in that Lightning stage. From here, we're going to pipe our image into this next stage. So I'm going to unblock this. And the custom node you're going to want to download is it's called image to text, right? So when you go into Comfy Manager, go to image to text. And you actually don't have to download any models specifically, because when you run it the first time, it will download the model for you. It will take you a few minutes the first time because it is going to be about between, I think it's around 8 to 10 gigs, if I'm not mistaken. And just as a caution, for people that are running systems that don't have, at least 8 gigabytes of VRAM in their video card, this may not work for you. So just as a caveat. But you can see, right, basically we are going to draw that image through. And this image to text basically has a loader, right? So you're basically having to bring up a model, and that model, will again download for you. And in this case, we're going to use the Uform-Qwen. You have a few different options, kind of preset options for you. You could see describe photograph. What is this? Please describe as an AI expert, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I find these are great for just general description of the of what's going on. So if I go and say, please describe this image in detail, and I run it, it does actually a really amazing job, right? Saying it's depicting a man and a horse in a stable, man standing next to the horse, and he's wearing an orange sweatshirt, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you'll see different models will have little, as they call it, hallucinations, or things that just don't quite match up. Like if I bring this description over here, right? So he's wearing an orange sweatshirt, that's right. Man's holding a carrot in his hand, that's right. You will find sometimes it will describe elements that are just maybe not perfect or not detailed. In this case, it actually did a pretty good job, except you can see horse does not have a white muzzle. So it's never going to be perfect, at least not for a while, but it's pretty darn close, which is great. Now, you're going to say, well, that's great. I have a description, but what can I do with this? Well, it's kind of cool because now that you have text that's automatically coming from your image, let's say you want to reimagine your image as something else. So you could bring that string into, let's say, a mile high styler. And we're going to turn that positive text over, and that's going to become our positive prompt. We can leave our negative prompt as usual. And, basically we could bring in a whole, regular rendering, right? And we're going to just do we're going to basically just bring in a text encode here for a positive prompt and bring that into our positive sampler. We'll leave the rest of the way it is. And oops, we won't need LCM for this one. We'll just render it as usual. All right, there we go. So that's pretty good, right? So is it perfect? No, not perfect, but it's just a complete re-render, a complete reimagining, if you want to call it that, of the original picture. So it's kind of cool, right? It kind of can let you play with different elements here and kind of reimagine things. Now it's time to get a little bit creative. So we've learned Lightning, and we've learned how to do this kind of LLM chat. And I want to say, well, how do we do it a little bit more dynamically? So in this case, I created just a text string that said, help me with, right? I just renamed this, right? Renamed the title. You can always modify the title. I said, help me with, and I said, baking bread. And I said, run. And, it's going to run through the normal model. And we're going to walk through this slowly as it's rendering. But you could see here, the whole loader is the same as normal. And now it's going to go through, and I have a little engine instruction. So if I look at that, it says writing a paragraph without numbering in a total of 4 sentences, describe in flowery detail how and we just said, bake bread, right? And we're running it through our image to text. Now you're wondering, like, well, we haven't created an image yet. Where's the image coming from? Well, I just created a little blank image because we're actually not using the model to actually evaluate an image. We're actually just using it as a chat GPT, right? You can actually use this thing as a regular chat GPT, and it's going to do everything you want. So if you said, like, hey, tell me how to build a house, it's going to give you steps in your show text on how to do that. So really anything you can normally do with like a chat GPT, you can do here. Okay, but so in that case, we have some method to the madness here. So we're basically doing our image to text. We're using a custom string, right? So we're using a custom query, and we're showing what this is. So now this says, oh, okay, so baking bread is a time-consuming process, et cetera, et cetera. First step is to do this, and the second step, and the third step, et cetera. So this is, show text is by the Python GOS custom node, right? So I'm going to include that in the text. But obviously, we want to be able to create multiple steps. Why? What's the actual end result? I should just stop. Like, what's the end result? So if I go, I actually have this automatically creating a multi-stage kind of panel showing each of the steps of the process. And all I did was literally just type the text and hit go. So it's kind of cool. All right, so let's get back down here. So we have obviously this big paragraph of stuff, and each sentence, of course, separated by a period with a space. So that's going to be my way to split. And Comfy Roll Studios, Susie has done an amazing job with these text nodes. She has created this node that lets you split the string. We know that each sentence is broken out by a period and a space. And so we have 4 different strings. Each one of the strings, I just split out here, and you can see it splits it out. And then we use that to do a separate render by itself into a separate image. So in this case, we are using LCM, right, as our normal rendering method for 15 steps. And we bring it into that final image, the decode. It goes into another Comfy Roll node called the meme template, right? We used it in a previous video to create a comic strip. But all we're doing is just creating a, stage 1. Obviously, I'm repeating stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 with each render. And, I format that image. So if I kind of zoom out here, right, it's just a repeat. So you have the same sort of block each time. Each of the boxes, obviously, the text going into the clip encode. Each of the clip encodes going into the sampler, into the positive. And obviously, that's being decoded into the meme template, which then goes there. Now, what's bringing it all together into that nice 4 block? So I'm going to go all the way up here. And you can see we're using in the impact pack the image batch. And so basically it's a dynamic node. It's really great because you can just add as many as you want. I use this, in fact, for my testing platform. I have 105 or 120 different images in here. It just keep adding to the bottom one, and it'll keep adding more and more and more. But you basically make this image batch and you pipe that to yet another Comfy Roll Studio node called the image grid panel. And so in there, you're just saying how many columns do you want. So we know we have 4 images. So we're basically putting them into 2 columns. So it's going to be a 2 by 2. You can change thickness of the borders, etc., etc. But you're then just piping the end image grid panel to your preview bridge or to your preview. And that's it. So it's kind of cool, really kind of innovative, but this is like the beginning stage. And of course, as you start testing this out, you'll be like, hey, Grok, the number of steps, it's numbering my steps and it's not doing it exactly I want. This is not perfect, right? This is kind of the beginner piece to get you to the next level. So, so happy trails with this. But as always, thank you so much for subscribing and sharing with all your friends. I'm going to be actually including pretty soon an occasional AI community art showcase video, just to let people chill and see all the great works that everyone is creating. But otherwise, we'll talk to you soon.